Auto glass test. We're gonna see what the better law enforcement type bullet is, and we're gonna do a 9mm test today. The reason why 9mm is that cartridge where it's just powerful enough that it generally does pretty well in our ballistic testing. It's fast enough, it's powerful enough to expand hollow points reliably, but it's just weak enough to where it's not necessarily going to show great results if you have a bad bullet design. Like something like 357 SIG, for example, might look impressive even though it's using a terrible bullet because it's just so fast. So what I'm testing today is our 124 grain plus P law enforcement loads. I was going to test the Golden Saber bonded along with this, but I couldn't acquire it. I couldn't find it anywhere. And, you know, from a lot of reports I've heard, it's not necessarily the most reliable ammo. And I've had my own issues with Remington ammo in the past. So I'm going to use my 5-inch barrel M&P 2.0 pistol for the test, just to get the best possible results I can get. So we have our Federal HST, our Spear Gold Dot, our Winchester Defender, which is basically the same as Winchester Ranger bonded. And we have our Critical Duty here. All of these are 124 grain. All of these are rated at plus P. And our HST and our Gold Dot here, this was supplied to me by one of my Patreon supporters, Observer Well. So thank you for that ammunition. Now what we have here for our rate of velocity with our HST and our Defender, those are rated at 1200 feet per second. Our Gold Dot is rated at 1220 feet per second, and our Critical Duty is rated at 1175 feet per second. So pretty close ratings overall, but we don't know what we're actually going to get until we test it through the chronograph. So we're going to go through the chronograph, see what kind of velocity and accuracy I get at the same time. And then for my gel test, I have this windshield here, but what I'm going to do here is I'm going to test with my real world simulation. So we have 4 layers of cotton sweatshirt on the front of here. We have 3 inches of clear ballistics to represent hitting a pectoral muscle. We have a 1/4 inch medium density fiberboard to represent hitting ribs or sternum, and to more clear ballistics. So we're going to do a shot into this gel here without the windshield in the way to kind of see what the best potential in a real world simulation would be, where we have just, you know, a person that's dressed basically, and then they have ribs or sternum in there, and we'll see how that performs. And then after that, we'll put up a new gel block. Then we're going to put up the windshield here and see how that performs, because a lot of times, you know, auto glass is one of the main things that it's fired through and can really negatively affect the bullet's ability to expand and penetrate well, because glass is basically as hard as rock. So when you hit that, it sometimes will deform that bullet. So we're going to kind of see what the better bullet is, you know. And another thing here is these are not all designed exactly the same. Our Defender and our Gold Dot are truly a bonded bullet. Our HST and our Critical Duty are more of a banded bullet, where there's a band mechanically locking that bullet jacket to the core. So it acts as the same thing as a bonding here. So, and also our Critical Duty has a little bit harder lead than typical. So that's some differences there with that ammunition. And after I do that test, I am going to do my normal test where I shoot out my steel to see what kind of practical accuracy I can get, because accuracy is important. And, you know, I can shoot well enough that I can kind of tell a difference if one's not as accurate or not. I can be consistent enough to see. So we'll do some various distances for practical accuracy and see how they compare. So let's get started with this test. All right, let's see what kind of practical accuracy we're going to get here. First up, we have our Gold Dot 124 grain plus P. This is rated at 1220 feet per second. Let's see what our actual velocity is out of my 5-inch M&P. See how close we get to 1220. 1295, 1279, 1296, 1270. No read. And that's a bit above rated velocity. Now our HST here, this is rated at 1200 feet per second, same bullet weight. Let's see what this gives us. No read. 1267, 1237, 1234, 1270. So a little bit less consistent and definitely slower than the Gold Dot. Let's see how our Defender and our Critical Duty do. All right, Winchester Defender rated at 1200 feet per second. Let's see what this gives us. 1268, 1274, 1279. No read. 1243. Not super consistent, but, you know, above rated velocity. Now this one has the slowest rating at 1175 for a critical duty. Let's see what this actually gives us. 1191, 1216, 1196, 1206, 1293. So just a hair above rate of velocity. Noticeably quite a bit less recoil with that critical duty than what we had with the rest of those. So that's interesting. Let's hit our ballistics gel block with our real world simulation without the windshield in place and see how they do before we put that glass in place and see how they compare. So let's get started with that part of that test. All right, here's our basic real world test with denim and MDF. First up we have our gold dot. Let's see how this does. All right, let's try our HST now. Federal HST. See how this compares? For some reason that's just flying off there today, which isn't typical. Let's try our critical duty and our defender. Winchester Defender. See how this does? Let's try critical duty now. All right, critical duty. See how this compares? Let's go take a look. All right, so I typically don't, that's weird that it keeps flying off. That typically doesn't, once in a while, but not all the time. It might be kind of hard to see this at these angles because they do kind of overlap, but let's pull it to the top up here and take a look. This first one's our gold dot. The one below that's our critical duty. And then we can kind of look from here. It's kind of hard to see in the back, but our defender is right here, and our critical duty's up here, so we'll probably have to take this apart to take a look at. But one thing we're seeing that's very consistent is that all three of our HST, defender, and gold dot went to the same penetration. Our critical duty went deeper. So I'm just gonna confirm this here. In the back we have our gold dot on the bottom here, 14 1/4. Our HST might be about 14 1/2, and our defender 14 1/4. So we'll get some measurements on that in terms of photographs, but I'll also pull these out and we'll take a look at them. And what we got here with our critical duty is 18 inches. So very interesting there, the way that those turned out. It looks like the critical duty actually had the least amount of damage, and their gold dot's probably the second least amount. But when we look at our defender and our HST, they both have a larger cut pattern there. Another interesting thing here, as I was looking at this MDF here, and we can kind of see something going on here that's really interesting. Yeah, we got our gold dot, our HST, our defender, critical duty. So these are all about the same size hole, which would mean they're expanding about the same amount as they hit this, and that would account for them having about the same penetration. But our critical duty has slightly smaller hole, so it's a more controlled expansion, which isn't surprising considering it has a little bit harder lead, a lead alloy for the core. So let's put up our windshield and we'll do more of our real world through glass test, and we'll see how these compare. All right, I backed up just a little bit further just to try to avoid glass hitting me. I'm putting on some gloves, you know, just as much protection as I think I might need for messing with this. I realized that start of that gel block is only about 6 inches from the glass, and you know, sometimes the angles of that glass can change where those bullets impact, and it can change whether it's going inward or outward. I just happen to be testing it going inward. It would pretty much be the same results going outward if you're shooting out, except the impacts would be kind of high. So it's potential that the angle being this way, that the impacts will be low because it's so hard it's going to deform the bullet nose, potentially push it low. So I think I got that glass stuck up there well enough it's not going to fall down, and I tried to tape up that first 3 inches to try to prevent that from falling off. But gold dot first, and this is one of the #1 law enforcement loads out there, probably the #1 used. So going through auto glass, it's kind of hard to even see through that glass, but I'm going to try to make an accurate shot, see what we get. All right, Federal HST. I attempted to move that glass just a little bit to try to get really a fresh hole through that glass. So there's our Federal HST. See if I can make a good hit with this. All right, let's try the others. And what I'm actually seeing here, we're gonna have to redo that HST as I didn't capture it, but what it looks like we're seeing here is it's actually drifting upward, not downward like I thought. So it's not hitting exactly where I want it to hit. So I'm gonna hit lower on that block. Hopefully I don't hit the other bullet channel, just below that first bullet hole there. See if we can hit an HST in there. All right, let's try something different. All right, we have our Winchester Defender, also same as the Ranger. I just hit a fresh piece of glass here. See our Defender does. Get hit with just tiny amounts of glass, but not enough to hurt me. Let's try the critical duty. All right, critical duty. I should be able to make a shot right above that without hitting that hole there. Critical duty. It might have went high. Let me go take a look. So we captured all those bullets in there. Let's go take a look at those. All right, so we went through a similar spot here with our first 2 bullets. We might have kind of clipped the same part of MDF, but you know, there's basically 5 holes. I'm going to count that as fine. We definitely see a lot of glass spalling right here, hitting this denim or this fabric. But what we're seeing here is with our gold dot, we had the least amount of penetration, which is surprising to me. And the most mangling, which actually is not surprising me. I kind of thought that could happen because gold dot is a bonded bullet, which the way that the Spear gold dot does it is they plate it a bunch of times. So it's not like a thick jacket the way the other cartridges are. So what we got with our gold dot is lots of mangling, and we only got about 8 3/4 inches of penetration. That leaves a lot to be desired. However, when you're going through glass, you're probably taking a shot that on the body isn't going to need a lot of penetration. That could, you know, be something to think about. Plus, even if it's a center mass shot, you know, we're not going to need through the arm because they're going to be seated forward basically. So about 8 3/4. So what we have with our Federal HST, so you got about 10 3/4, which is pretty good. Now, the most surprising of all, I was not expecting this. Our Winchester Defender or Ranger is a bonded bullet the way the gold dot is, but I don't know if they use the same process or not. But even after going through that glass, going through its own MDF hole completely on its own, no doubt there, we got a penetration of 13 3/4. That's very surprising. But with our critical duty, which has a higher antimony lead, is supposed to be tougher. We only got a penetration just barely more than the gold dot of about 9 3/4. So going from what I'm seeing here, this is really surprising. I thought the Winchester Defender would be the worst of these. Honestly, what I'm seeing is it looks like it's the best of these. So let's cut open these blocks here and we'll take a closer look at those bullets. All right, so here's a good look at these. Here's our gold dot. Both are plain gel, well, with our MDF, and then the top row here is our ones through our glass. So there's our gold dot, our HST, our Defender, and our critical duty. Interesting thing here, what we're seeing here with our gold dot, you know, it does beautifully when we're just hitting a normal barrier, but when we hit glass, I mean, it just completely mangled and destroyed that bullet. To me, that's not necessarily a very good design there. With our HST, it did a little bit better because our expansion is basically just as big, and we have these really hard, tough petals that are still sticking out. And with just our plain shot through MDF, it did really well also. With our Defender here, this looks like more common and typical, and we can see here we're truly jacketed, a very thick jacket here. This is very good expansion with wicked petals. And then when we went through our auto glass, this is really kind of what I want to see. Almost as much expansion, but not quite as much, so that we can still get that penetration. Overall, that looks really good. Now, our critical duty, what's interesting here, with our regular shot here, it didn't expand that much, but because it has a higher antimony lead going through that auto glass, it's like it did better as far as expansion goes. But these three didn't penetrate enough, and this actually looks like the Defender still looks like it's kind of doing the best. So a 124+P Defender or 124+P Ranger looks to be like a really good choice here. If I had to pick a second winner here, well, it's kind of hard to say. All of them kind of didn't penetrate quite enough. I'd say the HST is probably number 2, and then probably 3 is our critical duty, and then 4 would be our gold dot. That's just kind of a quick thought on what ones, you know, rank better or worse. Interesting. None of this really matters though if I can't hit the target accurately, and sometimes different ammo acts a little weird. So let me see if I can shoot the steel and see how accurate they are for me. All right, 25 yards from the target. Just want to see what kind of practical accuracy I can get. So first up, I'm going to have 5 gold dot in this magazine, and then the rest of them in the mag. The last 5 are HSTs. So 25 yards from the target. Here's our gold dot. All right, here's our Federal HSTs. All right, they all shoot pretty good. Next 5 are going to be Winchester Defenders. And the last here are our critical duties. All right, they all shoot really good. This isn't much of a challenge. Let me back it up. I'm just going to go straight up to 75 yards because I can learn a little bit more about where these are hitting. And it just tells me a little bit about the ammo. So let me back it up. All right, 75 yards. If you didn't know, I do have this staked out and marked out for 75 yards. So I have 8 rounds of the gold dot, then 8 rounds of the HST. I'm going to switch mags. I'll have 8 rounds of the Defender and 8 rounds of the critical duty. So here's our gold dot, 75 yards from the muzzle, actually. See how our gold dot does. All right, missed a couple. Now here's our HSTs. That's that last one. All right. Now we have our Winchester Defender. All right, now we have our critical duty. right, I'm gonna say they are all as accurate as each other. Every miss that I made was definitely on me. As a viewer, you can tell I'm kind of popping them off a little bit quicker than what maybe I should be. And all of them are about right. So the takeaway from this, you know, there's a few differences here. I did notice the critical duty had the least recoil, but you know, when you're talking 9mm, one that has a little bit of recoil, one that has a little bit less, really none of them have much recoil. Our velocity was definitely the slowest, so our weakest one was our critical duty. I think our most powerful one was the gold dot, and the other two were pretty similar from what I recall. And when we look at our regular tester, it seemed like all of them did pretty well. We all were pretty much the same, except the duty went deeper in our regular gel testing. But when we put up that glass, that barrier, everything changed, and there's a lot of things that really surprised me. I thought 100% that the HST would be the best because it has the hardest jacket. It's very powerful. I thought that the Defender and the Gold Dot would both do bad, but I thought the Gold Dot would do significantly better, and the worst here would be the Defender. And I thought the Critical Duty would do almost as well as our HST. But in reality, what we're seeing here is the Spirit Gold Dot, the #1 choice in law enforcement. To me, it looked like it did the worst. And after that, what we saw is our federal HST. It didn't do a whole lot better because it was very weak penetration, or low penetration. Our critical duty, which should have theoretically done the best because it has the hardest lead, it really didn't. I mean, it expanded better through a harder barrier than the rest, but it didn't do the best. And the most surprising here is the one I thought would be the worst was the best, that Winchester Defender Ranger bullet, bonded Ranger. That surprised me significantly. I didn't think that that bullet would do that well. So that's what you get today with our auto glass test. You know, if I had to pick one of these, it's kind of hard to say here. I've been using HST and Gold Dot for years. I rely on all of them. I like Gold Dot because there's so many multi-calibers in it. I previously thought the HST was probably the best bullet overall, but I might have to change my thinking a little bit because after seeing this test, it looks like Winchester's bullet's superior. So that's what you get today with this test. And again, thank you to Observer Well for sending the Gold Dot and the HST, which didn't do that well, but that's what you get today. So as always, comment, share, and like, and thanks for watching.